Security will escort you out if you try to enter. The words hit me like a physical blow as I stood in the marble lobby of the Meridian Tower, holding my invitation to the company's annual Excellence Awards ceremony. My invitation that had apparently been revoked due to inappropriate conduct. I stared at Marcus Chen, our HR director, his expression a mixture of fake sympathy and barely concealed satisfaction. Behind him, through the glass doors, I could see my colleagues in their evening attire, champagne glasses in hand, celebrating achievements that included work I had poured my soul into for the past 4 years. What inappropriate conduct? I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. The complaint filed against you last week, he replied, adjusting his tie. Insubordination, failure to follow proper channels, creating a hostile work environment. I knew exactly what he meant. The complaint filed by Derek Morrison, my direct supervisor, after I had dared to question why my cybersecurity protocol, the one that had saved the company from a devastating breach just 6 months ago, was being presented tonight as his innovation. I see, I said quietly, clutching my purse tighter. Inside was my phone, and on that phone was a contact I had been hesitant to use. Until now. I'm sure you understand, Sarah. Company policy is clear about these matters. As I walked away from the building, the sounds of celebration fading behind me, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I had memorized but never dialed. The contact simply read, J. Morrison, Wall Street Journal. Jennifer Morrison, Derek's ex-wife and senior investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal. A woman who had reached out to me 3 months ago with a cryptic message, if you ever want to tell the real story about Nexus Corp, call me. I had ignored it then, still believing that hard work and integrity would eventually be recognized. That was before I understood the true cost of corporate loyalty. My finger hovered over the call button as I stood on the sidewalk, watching the celebration I had been barred from. Then I pressed it. Jennifer Morrison. Ms. Morrison, this is Sarah Chen from Nexus Corporation. I think it's time we had that conversation. But before I tell you what happened next, let me take you back to where this all began. Because the revenge I'm about to share with you wasn't born from a single moment of betrayal. It was crafted over years of systematic undermining, stolen credit, and the gradual realization that the company I had devoted my career to saw me as nothing more than a disposable asset. My name is Sarah Chen, and until that night, I was the senior cybersecurity analyst at Nexus Corp, one of the fastest-growing fintech companies in the country. I had a talent for seeing vulnerabilities that others missed, for finding the weak points in systems that seemed impenetrable. Skills that had made me invaluable to the company, but invisible to its leadership. I grew up in San Francisco's Richmond district, the daughter of immigrants who had built a small but successful accounting firm from nothing. My parents taught me that excellence was its own reward, that good work would always be recognized. They were wrong about that last part. When I joined Nexus Corp fresh out of Stanford with my master's in cybersecurity, I believed I had found my calling. The company was young, innovative, and supposedly committed to merit-based advancement. My first 2 years seemed to confirm this belief. I developed a threat detection algorithm that caught security breaches 73% faster than existing systems. I identified a critical vulnerability in our payment processing system that could have exposed millions of customer financial records. I even created a training program that reduced security incidents across all departments by 45%. Each time, I submitted my work through proper channels, documented everything meticulously, and waited for recognition that never came. My immediate supervisor, James Walsh, was a decent man who appreciated my contributions but lacked the political acumen to ensure I received proper credit. When he retired, everything changed. Derek Morrison arrived with impressive credentials and a reputation for turning struggling security departments into award-winning teams. What nobody mentioned was his method, appropriating his team's innovations while positioning himself as the visionary leader who made it all possible. The first time it happened, I thought it was an oversight. I had developed a new encryption protocol that strengthened our client data protection by 340%. After presenting it to Derek in a private meeting, I was surprised to see him showcasing it to the executive team 2 weeks later with no mention of my involvement. "Great work on the encryption enhancement," I said afterward, hoping to clarify the attribution. Derek gave me a patronizing smile. "I'm glad you were able to contribute to the implementation. But strategic security architecture requires a comprehensive understanding of our business objectives that comes with experience." I was stunned. The entire concept, from theoretical framework to practical application, had been mine. But as a relatively new team member eager to prove myself, I let it slide. That was my first mistake. Over the following months, a pattern emerged. I would identify a security threat, develop a solution, present it to Derek, and watch as he transformed it into his own strategic initiative. When I finally gathered the courage to address this with Elena Rodriguez in Human Resources, her response was crushingly familiar. "Do you have documentation proving exclusive ownership of these concepts?" she asked, barely looking up from her computer. "I have the original development files with timestamps," I replied. "But you developed these during work hours using company resources?" "Well, yes, but..." "Then they're company property, not personal intellectual property. Derek is your supervisor. When he presents departmental achievements to leadership, that's appropriate management structure." I left her office understanding the unspoken rules of corporate hierarchy. Innovation flowed upward, credit rarely flowed down. I might have continued in this frustrating but tolerable situation if not for what happened 8 months ago. I had been monitoring suspicious activity in our network when I discovered something that made my blood run cold, a sophisticated cyber attack that had been slowly siphoning customer data for weeks. The breach was unlike anything I had seen before. The attackers had used advanced persistent threat techniques, creating backdoors in our system that were nearly impossible to detect. They had already accessed the personal information of over 200,000 customers, including social security numbers, bank account details, and investment portfolios. I worked 18-hour days for a week straight, tracing the attack vectors, identifying the compromised systems, and developing a comprehensive response protocol. My solution didn't just stop the breach, it created a revolutionary new security framework that would prevent similar attacks in the future. I prepared a detailed presentation for the emergency board meeting, including recommendations for customer notification, regulatory compliance, and long-term security improvements. But when I arrived at the conference room, Derek intercepted me at the door. "I'll handle this presentation," he said, taking my materials. "The board doesn't need to be confused by technical details. I'll provide the strategic overview they need to make informed decisions." I watched from the back of the room as Derek delivered a 20-minute presentation that completely misrepresented the scope of the breach and the sophistication of my response. He described the attack as a minor security incident that had been quickly contained through robust existing protocols. The board, reassured by his confident delivery, approved minimal remediation measures and praised Derek for his excellent crisis management. The revolutionary security framework I had developed was shelved as unnecessarily complex. 3 weeks later, a competing firm suffered a similar breach that made national headlines. Their response was chaotic, their customer data was fully compromised, and their stock price plummeted 40%. Nexus Corp's stock, meanwhile, rose 12% as investors praised our superior security infrastructure. Derek received a promotion to Vice President of Security and a $50,000 bonus for his exceptional leadership during the crisis. I received a standard 3% annual raise and a note in my personnel file about the importance of following proper reporting procedures. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by printouts of the security protocols I had developed, the breach analysis I had conducted, the framework I had created. All of it attributed to Derek in official company records. Something fundamental shifted inside me. If the company wanted to play politics instead of recognizing merit, I would show them exactly what that game looked like when played by someone who had been underestimated for too long. I began working on a new project, one I never mentioned at the office, never accessed on company devices, and never developed during business hours. Using my personal equipment and my own time, I enhanced my original security framework, creating something that would make Derek's stolen version look like a child's toy. But this was just the beginning. I started documenting every instance where my work had been appropriated, creating a comprehensive record with timestamps, original files, and email chains that showed the pattern of intellectual theft. I reached out to former colleagues who had left under similar circumstances, building a network of talented professionals who had been exploited by the same system. Marcus Kim from our fraud detection team had resigned after Derek claimed credit for his money laundering detection algorithm. Lisa Thompson from compliance had left when her regulatory framework was presented as Derek's innovation. Each conversation revealed a company culture that systematically exploited its most talented employees while rewarding those who excelled at corporate politics. More importantly, these conversations connected me with people who understood the true cost of allowing mediocrity to manage innovation. People who, like me, had continued creating despite the lack of recognition because that's who we fundamentally were. 6 months before the awards ceremony, I made contact with Jennifer Morrison. Our first conversation was brief. She was investigating corporate misconduct in the fintech sector and had heard rumors about Nexus Corp's internal practices. I wasn't ready to go on record then, still hoping that things might change. 3 months before the ceremony, I learned that Derek would be receiving the Innovation Excellence Award for his cybersecurity framework. The same framework I had developed, the one that had saved the company from catastrophic breach, was being celebrated as his strategic vision. That's when I began preparing my final move. I reached out to Jennifer again, this time with a different proposition. I had documentation of systematic intellectual theft, a pattern of misconduct that went far beyond my individual case. I had evidence of security breaches that had been covered up, customer data that had been compromised, and regulatory violations that had been ignored. Jennifer was interested. Very interested. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I provided her with a comprehensive dossier, Derek's pattern of appropriating subordinates' work, the company's habit of suppressing security incidents, and the culture of retaliation against employees who questioned these practices. All documented, all verifiable, all devastating. This is bigger than one person's stolen credit, Jennifer said during our final meeting. This is about a company that has built its reputation on lies while putting customer data at risk. When do you plan to publish? I asked. The morning after your awards ceremony. Maximum impact. I had hoped to attend the ceremony one last time, to watch Derek receive his award knowing that his moment of triumph would be his last. But when I arrived at the building and Marcus Chun delivered his ultimatum, I realized that the company had given me something even better, the perfect ending to my story. Standing on that sidewalk, watching the celebration I had been barred from, I made the call that would change everything. Jennifer Morrison. Ms. Morrison, this is Sarah Chun. I think it's time we had that conversation. Sarah, I've been expecting your call. Are you ready to go on record? I'm ready to tell the truth. Perfect. My article runs tomorrow morning. Would you be available for a follow-up interview? I looked back at the building where my former colleagues were toasting Derek's success, completely unaware that their celebration was about to become their downfall. I'll be available. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own narrative. At 6 a.m., my phone started buzzing. Text messages from former colleagues, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, and emails flooding my inbox. Jennifer's article had gone live. Fintech giant Nexus Corp built success on stolen innovations. Internal documents reveal pattern of intellectual theft and security cover-ups. The article was devastating. Jennifer had not only documented Derek's theft of my work, but had uncovered a systematic pattern of appropriation that affected dozens of employees. She had detailed the security breaches that had been covered up, the customer data that had been compromised, and the regulatory violations that had been ignored. But the most damaging revelation was the evidence of Derek's incompetence. Jennifer had obtained recordings of internal meetings where Derek couldn't answer basic questions about the systems he claimed to have developed. She had documented instances where his misunderstanding of security protocols had actually made the company more vulnerable to attacks. By 7 a.m., Nexus Corp stock had dropped 23% in pre-market trading. By 8 a.m., the SEC had announced an investigation into the company's security practices and disclosure policies. By 9 a.m., 3 major clients had suspended their contracts pending the outcome of the investigation. My phone rang at 9:30 a.m. The caller ID showed Derek's number. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "This is all a misunderstanding. We can work this out." "I'm listening," I replied calmly. "The article misrepresents our collaborative work environment. You were a valued member of the team, and your contributions were always recognized internally. Is that why I was banned from the awards ceremony?" "That was Marcus's decision, not mine. A procedural overreaction to a minor complaint." "A complaint you filed." Silence. "Then, what do you want? A promotion? A raise? We can discuss executive-level positions." "What I wanted was recognition for my work. But you've taught me something valuable, Derek. Sometimes the best way to get recognition is to take it." I hung up and turned on the financial news. The lead story was Nexus Corp's stock price, which had now fallen 31%. The reporter was interviewing industry experts about the implications of the allegations, and every expert seemed to have the same opinion. If even half of the claims were true, Nexus Corp faced an existential crisis. At 10 a.m., I received a call from Robert Nexus himself, the company's founder and CEO. "Sarah, I've just finished reading the Wall Street Journal article. I need to meet with you immediately." "I'm available to discuss the truth," I replied. "My office. 1 hour." When I arrived at Nexus Corp's headquarters, the atmosphere was electric with panic. Employees clustered in small groups, whispering about the article and its implications. Security guards who had been prepared to escort me out 12 hours earlier now nodded respectfully as I passed. Robert Nexus was waiting in his office, looking like he had aged a decade overnight. "Sarah, I want you to know that I had no knowledge of the allegations in this article. If they're true, I'm appalled." "They're true," I said simply. "Every word is documented and verifiable." "Then we need to make this right. Derek has been placed on administrative leave, pending an investigation. I want to offer you his position as Vice President of Security, with a 40% salary increase and full authority to restructure the department." I studied his face, seeing the desperation behind the offer. 6 months ago, such recognition would have meant everything to me. Now, it felt like too little, too late. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Nexus, but I'm not interested in fixing a system that's fundamentally broken." "What would it take?" "It would take acknowledging that this isn't just about Derek. It's about a corporate culture that systematically exploits its most talented employees while rewarding those who excel at taking credit for others' work. We can change the culture. We can implement new policies, create oversight committees, establish clear attribution protocols. You could have done all of that before if you had cared enough to listen to the people actually doing the work." Robert leaned back in his chair. "So what's your plan? Are you going to a competitor?" "I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to build something better." That afternoon, I received calls from 7 different cybersecurity firms offering me positions. But I also received something more interesting, a call from Dr. Amanda Foster, a venture capitalist who specialized in funding cybersecurity startups. "I've been following your story," she said. "But more importantly, I've been researching your work. The security framework you developed is revolutionary. Have you considered starting your own company?" "I've considered it," I replied carefully. I'd like to discuss funding. The market is hungry for authentic innovation, and you have something that can't be replicated or stolen, genuine expertise. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in Dr. Foster's office with a term sheet for $2.5 million in seed funding. CyberShield Solutions would launch with me as CEO and Chief Technology Officer, with a mission to provide enterprise-level security services to mid-market companies that couldn't afford the bloated, ineffective solutions offered by firms like Nexus Corp. 1 month after the award ceremony where I had been denied entry, I was featured on the cover of Cybersecurity Weekly magazine. The headline read, "The Whistleblower Who Became an Industry Leader." 3 months after that, CyberShield Solutions had signed its first major client, a Fortune 500 company that had terminated its contract with Nexus Corp following the security scandal. Our enhanced security framework had prevented 2 major attack attempts in the first month of implementation. The true vindication came 6 months later when Nexus Corp announced it was being acquired by a larger competitor for significantly less than its pre-scandal valuation. Derek had been fired and was facing federal charges for securities fraud related to the misrepresentation of security breaches. Robert Nexus had stepped down as CEO and was cooperating with federal investigators. I was reviewing CyberShield's quarterly results when my assistant mentioned that someone from Nexus Corp was in our reception area asking to meet with me. "Who?" I asked. "Marcus Chun. He says he's applying for a position." I almost laughed. The HR director who had threatened to have me escorted out by security was now seeking employment at my company. "Send him in," I said. "I'm curious to hear what he has to say." Marcus entered looking nothing like the confident corporate bureaucrat I remembered. The man who had delivered ultimatums with such authority now looked defeated, desperate. "Thank you for seeing me, Sarah. I know I don't deserve it. What can I do for you, Marcus? I'm hoping you might consider me for a position. I know I made mistakes, but I have 15 years of HR experience and—" "You made more than mistakes," I interrupted. "You enforced a system that systematically exploited talented employees while protecting those who stole their work." "I was following company policy. I was doing my job." "Your job was to protect the company's most valuable assets, its people. Instead, you protected its most toxic managers." Marcus looked down. "I know. I was wrong. But I need work. I have a family, a mortgage. No one in the industry will hire me after what happened." I studied him for a moment, remembering the casual cruelty with which he had barred me from the awards ceremony. "I understand you need work. But you need to understand something too. Actions have consequences. The culture you helped create didn't just hurt me, it hurt dozens of talented people who deserved better." "I know. I'm sorry." "I'm sure you are. But sorry doesn't rebuild the careers that were damaged or restore the innovations that were stolen." I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. "I won't be offering you a position, Marcus. But I will give you some advice. If you want to work in HR again, you need to understand that your job is to protect people, not policies." After he left, I sat in my office reflecting on how much had changed. The company that had once dismissed me as just another analyst now sent former executives to seek my approval. But the real victory wasn't in their recognition, it was in building something authentic. CyberShield Solutions had grown to 35 employees, all of them carefully selected for both their technical skills and their integrity. We had developed a security framework that was 3 generations ahead of anything Nexus Corp had claimed to create. Most importantly, we had built a culture where innovation was valued and properly attributed. 1 year after the awards ceremony where I had been told I would be escorted out by security, I received an invitation to give the keynote address at the National Cybersecurity Conference. As I walked onto that stage, I saw faces I recognized in the audience, former colleagues, industry leaders, and several people from Nexus Corp's current leadership team. But this time, they weren't looking at me with dismissal or contempt. They were looking at me with something I had never seen from them before: respect. I began my speech with a reference to the evening that had changed my life, 1 year ago, I was banned from my own company's awards ceremony. Security was prepared to escort me out if I tried to enter. A murmur ran through the audience. That moment taught me something valuable, I continued. It taught me that sometimes being excluded from one table is exactly the push you need to build something better, something that's entirely your own. I shared my journey from overlooked analyst to industry leader, focusing not on the betrayals I had experienced but on the innovations I had created. I talked about the importance of authentic leadership, the value of recognizing genuine talent, and the power of building cultures that reward merit over politics. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. After my speech, I was approached by dozens of people, young professionals who had experienced similar situations, executives who wanted to learn from my example, and entrepreneurs who were building their own companies based on authentic innovation. But the most meaningful conversation was with a young woman named Emily who worked as a data analyst at a major tech company. "I've been experiencing something similar to what you described," she said quietly. "My supervisor has been taking credit for my work, and I don't know what to do." "Document everything," I advised. "Keep records of your original work, your contributions, and any evidence of appropriation. But most importantly, don't let it diminish your confidence in your own abilities." "Did you ever doubt yourself?" "Every day. But I learned that self-doubt is a luxury you can't afford when you're building something meaningful." "What if I'm not brave enough to leave?" "You don't have to be brave enough to leave. You just have to be brave enough to believe in your own worth." As I left the conference, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of being overlooked had transformed into the power of authentic leadership. The colleagues who had once dismissed me were now seeking my guidance. The company that had banned me from its celebration was now struggling to remain relevant in an industry where I had become a recognized leader. But the sweetest victory wasn't in their recognition or their struggles. It was in the knowledge that I had built something better, not just a more successful company, but a more authentic way of doing business. The revenge I had planned had succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. But its most valuable result wasn't the destruction of those who had wronged me. It was the creation of something that honored the very values they had rejected: integrity, merit, and genuine innovation. Have you ever been in a situation where your contributions were overlooked or someone else took credit for your work? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your power when others try to diminish it. Remember, sometimes being excluded from one table is exactly the invitation you need to build something better, something that's entirely yours. The most powerful seat isn't the one they save for you. It's the one you create for yourself.